Hi, everybody. This is Barbara Miller from Museum of the Moving Image. I want to welcome you. It's so glad to be with you. Since mid-March, as many of you know, we've been out of the museum's building, where, among many other things, we have an ongoing exhibition devoted to the work of Jim Henson. As part of the remote programming we've been doing since we shut our doors, we've had many conversations exploring Jim Henson's remarkable body of work, with the puppeteers, designers, and others who have brought his stories and characters to life and helped shape an enduring legacy. Tonight, I'll be talking with Jason Weber and Peter Brooke, creative supervisors at Jim Henson's Creature Shop, which is part of the Jim Henson Company. They've both been with the shop for decades and will have a lot of stories to share. Next week is another episode of Craig Shemin and Stephanie DeBrusso's Q&A, this time with special guest actor and puppeteer Fran Brill. So I hope you tune into that because it will be awesome. Before we start, we look forward to welcoming you in person to Museum of the Moving Image when we reopen, which we hope will be soon. In the meantime, we'll continue to bring you events like this one, along with a lot of other great content. Please check out our website, movingimage.us. We have virtual cinema screenings. We have a lot of other live events about a range of different things, media production tutorials for kids, and lots more. So please go check it out. Some of you watching are members, hello, and some of you watching are new to MoMI, so welcome, and please consider joining our community. Also, I see on our RSVP list that a lot of names recur over the months that we've been doing these Henson programs. So I really want to say that I'm glad to be with all of you, and I hope you are all having safe summers and have as much joy as we can find in these crazy times. I'll just mention we provide these and many other events for free with the hope that if you're watching, you'll make a donation to the museum in whatever amount you are able to. This will help bring you more events like this one, as well as equip us with the support we need to open our doors. So if you can help out, please do. Just to make things easy, I shamelessly put a link to our donation page at the top of the chat. So you can go find that. And finally, Karen Falk, Archives Director at the Jim Henson Company, and the true keeper of the flame is behind the scenes with us, which is fantastic and generous of her. If you have general questions or questions that you'd like Jason or Pete to answer during the conversation, please put those questions in the Q&A box, and Karen will be monitoring that. So before I bring on Jason and Pete, I will tell you a little bit about them. Jason Weber began working with Jim Henson's Creature Shop in 1985 as a freelance fabric painter and dyer. He's worked on numerous projects such as Muppets Tonight, The Muppets Christmas Carol, Muppets Treasure Island, Elmo and Grouchland, The Jim Henson Hour, The Webulous World of Dr. Seuss, and many others. In 2002, Jason was appointed as the New York-based creative supervisor at the Creature Shop's work on Sesame Street and other things. He oversees all of Sesame Street's projects there and acts as an art director and designer for the series' domestic production, international co-productions, home video, PR appearances, and more. He's been awarded 10 Emmys for his work as part of the Sesame Street team. Peter Brook began his relationship with the Jim Henson Company in 1988 as a sculptor on Jim Henson's The Storyteller. His work can be seen in such films as Where the Wild Things Are, The Producers, Cats and Dogs, Dr. Dolittle, The Flintstones, as well as the TV projects Dinosaurs and Jim Henson's The Storyteller. As creative supervisor at the shop, Pete is responsible for the conception, design, and sculpt of each character and creature brought to life. Brooke's own fine art sculpture work has received the Gold Medal for Best Sculpture from the California Art Club and the Award of Excellence from the Society of Animal Artists. Pete himself is a human, but animal artist. That is great. So with that, I would like to welcome Pete and Jason to the screen. Please join me.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
That was a lot. There's a sort of a lot to get through before we start talking. And if the two of you hadn't had such accomplished careers, we would have gone through that quicker. So it's fantastic to be able to talk with you. You know, I know you both and have worked with you both separately on various things through the years, and but this is the first time that the three of us are talking together. So it's great
True.
to be with you and to have a chance to explore your work.
Happy to be here. And hello to everyone watching. It's great to be here.
So I think I'll start off by saying that one of the things that I most treasure about the ongoing relationship that Museum of the Moving Image has with all things Henson, because we have our ongoing Henson exhibition in our collection. One of the things I treasure most is the time I get to spend at the Creature Shop in New York, which is conveniently, amazingly, right down the street from MoMI. We didn't plan it that way, it just happened. Every time I walk in there, it is like being in a fairy tale land, and it fills me with joy. And I just need to let you know that it feels like such a privilege to be there, such a magical place. So maybe both of you can say a little bit about what the shop is and what happens there. Jason, you're in New York, and Pete, you're in LA. Jason, do you want to start and tell us something about the New York shop?
Sure. As you mentioned, the workshop itself really is kind of like a magical place. It's a wonderland of sorts. And even though I've been there as long as I have, it's never the same. It's interesting because in New York, since I joined in 1985, we've been in about 4 different locations, 5 if you count one of the temporary ones. But you know, our main client in New York is Sesame Street, except it's not the only project we get to work on, which is wonderful. So that basically every time you come over, Barbara, there's something sort of strewn all over the entire shop, you know, something new, some project we're working on, whether it's something for the cruise ship or the polar bears for Atlanta and Orlando and Vegas, and or a commercial or some new show that we're pitching or something. It's always fun there. And we get the honor of being able to hire incredibly gifted people who are as passionate about their work as we are. And we get to teach them, learn from them, get a sense of family for them. And it's just, there's no place like it. It's a wonderful place to work, and I'm honored to have been there as long as I have.
What about the LA shop, Pete? No, you can't say anything bad about it after Jason said all those good things.
No, there's nothing bad about it. Yeah, here in Los Angeles, we've been around since about 1994, and the Los Angeles shop kind of came out of our experience on Dinosaurs, which originally was those main characters were built in the London shop, which is where I started. And as a matter of fact, not going into necessarily the history of the Creature Shop, but when I started, it was in the old Hampstead workshop, which is an area of London, North London, and it happened to be literally opposite Jim's London home. So when Jim was in London, in the UK, he used to come across quite regularly. But anyway, we built the Creature to Dinosaurs, and we came to Los Angeles, and I was one of the handful of people to come over and do that particular show. And then after that, Brian Henson himself had said, well, you know, do you want to stay here? I'm thinking about opening a Los Angeles branch of the London shop. Do you want to stay, or do you want to go back to London? And I ended up staying. And it's been great. You know, I have not regretted it ever since, you know, at all. And but I will say that the Los Angeles shop stylistically is a little different from New York. We work, I mean, there's a lot of cross collaboration, but as Jason says, stylistically, the New York shop makes these amazing puppets, and we tend to do more animatronic type work. We do a little bit of puppet stuff, but generally more animatronics, and we've also got the digital side of the Creature Shop as well here in Los Angeles. And also in Los Angeles is the Jim Henson Company, which is based down at the old Charlie Chaplin studios and the old A&M recording studios, which is on sort of corner of Sunset and La Brea. You know, I have regular interactions and regularly go down there, and I can talk with Lisa or Brian or whoever. And so we're a little bit, I guess you could almost say we're a little bit more connected with the company as a whole. Whereas, you know, many years ago, when the company was headquartered in New York, the New York shop had that kind of closer relationship with the company. But having said that, like I say, we're always on calls. And of course, in the past 4 months, we've been on many Zoom calls. So we've been able to see each other rather than just be on the phone. Yeah. So I could go on, but
Jason, when you started at the shop in New York in the late 80s as a freelancer, were you on Northern Boulevard then, or was it still, the shop was still in Manhattan?
It was in Manhattan at that time. It was in an old tenement building on many floors. I started as their fabric painter and dyer, working on the 5th floor, which was primarily costumes and Sesame Street. We were there until we moved out of that building in 2002. And they had been there, you know, for years before, and other places before I joined, right? But so when I joined in as a staff member in '96, that was for me, it was the permanent residence. And I loved that building. It was very quirky, but it was an amazing place to be, like in the heart of, you know, Upper Midtown, and it was a really great place to be.
Well, now you've got this great sort of loft space in Long Island City where it all happens. It would be great to drill down a little bit. I mean, you know, I think if you're a Henson fan, you know about the shop, you know a little bit about kind of how where the puppets are made, and that there's teams of folks working on those. It would be great to hear a little bit specifically from each of you about what it means to be a creative supervisor. And I'm imagining that is, you know, you each have the same title, but that your roles are somewhat different. So it'd be great to hear from you, Jason, first, just because I have the picture of you queued up in here. So we'll start with you, and hear a little bit about your day-to-day at work as a creative supervisor. What does that mean?
Sure. It actually is a very interesting question, because our jobs are very different. And I got the honor to be able to work with Pete briefly for a couple of months on a project I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. But to be able to be out there and see how they worked, and it was really fascinating. And Pete's artistry, I'm just in awe of it. He is a master sculptor, and his artistic eye is absolutely breathtaking. I am no sculptor, and it's really fascinating when you think about the different directions that people come to this workshop from. And I had a theater background. I was a costume designer. I became a textile artist and, as I said, fabric painter and dyer. And I was not a puppet builder. I am not a puppet builder. I am of sorts. But, you know, when you think about someone like Raleigh Cruson, who is a master puppet designer and builder and can do anything that is put in front of her, you know, I am not that. And so how did I become the creative supervisor of this puppet shop? And it's really kind of, I actually sit back and look, like, how did I get here? But this is an amazing place to work. It's an amazing family that has been together. It's a reliance on a team that is so skilled, and they've been doing their jobs for so long. Even when you're bringing in new people, they take them under their wings and teach them what they need to teach. I'm basically a glorified foreman, you know. I need to make sure that the work gets through the workshop. If there's designs to do, I will do that. If I'm available to do it, we'll hire others if I'm not. Sesame Street, being our main client, is so quick. A lot of the times, you know, normally when a new project is coming along and there's going to be a new character in it, you'll start from a design, whether it's 2D, 3D, mock-up, model, whatever, and go from there. But often Sesame Street is so fast. It's just, I'm going to do this and I hope you love it. And, you know, often they do, which is great. But, you know, we do it at any speed necessary. You know, some of the commercials come through. It's very important that you have that design phase early on. And so you get something to really sell the product, the project, get the backing needed to do it. And so, you know, I will be involved in that, whether I'm doing the designs myself, whether I'm supervising another designer to do that. I will supervise the building of the mock-ups, the models that will also bring us to the approvals for the final build. I will be responsible for dyeing the samples, you know, choosing the fabrics. Often I do that in cooperation with the builders, usually, whether they're costume builders or the prop builders. And we'll discuss about how it's going to be made, what it's going to be made out of, what are the colors, whether there's going to be a paint treatment on it, whether it will be distressed, and I'll do samples for all of those stages for the approval. And then once we're into that build, then if I'm available, I'm dyeing and painting the fabrics for the builders, sending them on. I'm involved with our production manager, Melissa Creighton, who helps with the nuts and bolts, with the scheduling, getting the approvals, getting the budgets, you know, watching the budgets, but also getting them approved from the clients. So we work as a team so that we can get to that finish line and get the project done on time, early if possible, you know, shipped off if it needs to be, and on budget.
It sounds incredibly hands-on. I mean, for someone who is overseeing a busy shop with so many people working, it's just amazing how hands-on that work tends to be, and that's the nature of it in a way. And I think that's one of the secrets of why, you know, the work is so outstanding, is that it's not just this from a distance kind of supervision. It really is a quality control that is very, very hands-on. And I'm sure it's similar work for you, Pete, but with different kinds of projects. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, you know, thanks, Jason. Very kind of you to say that, and back at you. You're an amazing artist yourself. For me, being the supervisor, really, you know, every day I go into work and there's designers, sculptors, mold makers, animatronic designers, mechanical designers, fabricators, costumers, and so on and so forth. So I'm dealing on a day-to-day basis with a lot of artists, really creative people. So first and foremost, I feel that it's my job to somehow create an environment that fosters each person's creativity, which means being available and being sharing the information. You know, oftentimes I'm the only person in a room talking with the director and the producer, for example, and the writers, or maybe I'm the only person who goes to a production meeting with all the key players on that particular project. And so it's my job then to go and share that information with everybody. And I like to do that on, you know, very transparently. You know, I don't really believe in you know, holding the information for any game playing. It's I try and transfer the information, share the information, and like I say, be available for any questions that might come up. But like I said, first and foremost is to create the environment that allows everybody to really excel at their job. And that's not just giving them the materials that they need, but it's also giving sometimes the mental support, the creative support, and as well as the technical support, and because I am only as good as the crew that works at the Creature Shop. I can't do it all myself, and I've been very, very fortunate over the years to have some of the best people, particularly here in Los Angeles, but I've worked with people across the world, and I've been very lucky to come across and work with some really outstanding talent.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the common thread is that you're both conduit from the company, from sort of bigger picture concerns into the artists that are doing the work day to day, but that you're also both very, very hands-on in terms of the art that's being created.
We are very hands-on. Yeah, that's for sure. And in large part, I need it. I need to be hands-on. I need to, and every once in a while, I need to put pencil to paper, and I need to get my hands in clay and so on and so forth. Or whatever it may be. I have my own creative needs as well. Just to keep me going.
And that's a good segue, because then the next thing that I really want to talk about with both of you is process, right? One of the real cornerstones of the work that the work of Jim Henson that really, really marks that work as very special and distinct is the integrity of the characters that he and his team brought to life, and that work continues. The spirit of that work continues. These characters are not just cute, not just funny, but they are somehow real. That there is somehow something sort of inherently human about them. So with that in mind, in your work, how does a character come to life from idea to finished puppet, and where in that process does that magic sort of come in? What do you attribute that to in the process? Let's see. I've got a picture of Abby here, Jason, just kind of randomly, because that's one of the images that I had access to in terms of design. So we can talk about Abby or not talk about Abby, but I'd love to hear from you, Jason, just about the process of kind of concept to execution. And it obviously involves some things that are outside of the shop. It's the puppeteers, right? But if you want to say a little bit about how it begins and ends up in a puppet that's performed.
Absolutely. And like I said, for Sesame Street, things often go very fast. However, Abby, for example, was, it was a very intentional addition to the cast. And we are going to do this fairy character that will be added, and we will have designs for it. And this went through a very complicated process. And to focus on this one is a little problematic, only in that every process of every character is different. And like Pete said, he's surrounded, and as am I, surrounded by artists, and often temperamental. But the fact that we get to work with them, and we are encouraging them to do their best. And characters can start on the page, a 2D drawing that someone did, whether it was one of us or an outside client brings the design in, and our team then interprets that, usually in a model or a mock-up, depending on what the character is. And often, even though there may be one drawing, we might do variations within the mock-up so that we can capture something in 3 dimensions that isn't clear on the page.
Sure.
And the one thing that's amazing about this is that these teams that both of us get to work with have been doing this for quite some time. The sculptors that Pete works with, the puppet builders that I work with, have a sense of shape and what shape does, what it means for personality.
Right.
There are those who do, down and dirty. There are those who do cute and adorable, and everybody has their strengths, and some people can do anything.
It's really interesting when I think back to the sort of back in the day when when Jim started the shop with John Celine, who is his first puppet master builder in the early 1960s. You know, there would be very, very often a really rough sketch that Jim would do that would then be delivered to Don to make something three-dimensional out of. And there would often be very little to go with other than some essence of a character. So do you find that mode of working, does that continue to this day, or is that something that is not really in place anymore?
Oh, very much so. And I'm often doing those napkin drawings that my team have to interpret. But and not to focus too much on Sesame Street all the time, but that amazing sketch that Jim did of Big Bird, you know, which is so, it's almost primitive and it's so endearing. And then how that bird was created, but also when you look at the original version of that on the first season to what it looks like now, the evolution that has happened with that same design, but it's still that character. Nobody questions it. It's really kind of amazing.
Yeah, I think that's right. Pete, I have some images here for you as well. I have some of these guys, and then this, right? So can you talk a little bit about how it goes from one to the next? And these are your sketches, and your sketches are beautiful. I mean, we have some on exhibit at the museum right now that sadly no one can see because we're closed. But
oh, right.
Yeah, but can you talk about your process?
Sure. Well, just to springboard from what Jason's saying, first and foremost, people are asking, this is from George of the Jungle. Okay, so these were expression sheets from George of the Jungle. Excuse me. First and foremost, we're creating personalities. Okay, we're creating, in a sense, actors that can work alongside the human characters in a show very often. We're not making monsters per se, you know, or even though it's called a creature shop, it's all about personality and so forth. So right at the very beginning, if we can get, okay, so, you know, if I'm doing a design, for example, if I can get an idea of the personality of the character that I'm ultimately going to be drawing, and it might be simple, it might be an evil character, a good character, a dumb character, a stupid, you know, whatever it may be. If I can get some kind of a little bit of a way in to figure out what the personality is, that will help, because what we have to do, and it's every step of the way, actually. It's both in the design and then the translation from the design from 2D to 3D, and then it's in the creation of the mechanical design, the animatronic design that goes into the brows and the eye blinks and so on and so forth, and then it goes into the paint and the costume, and so on and so forth, and then ultimately with the puppeteers. All those steps, I feel, we have to make sure that we are every step of the way bringing soul to that character, you know.
I wonder how this sort of just occurred to me. I mean, I'm sure it's not this way every time, but there must be cases, I guess, in my mind, where you're creating a character when either when the puppeteer has already been selected, maybe. So you're kind of designing with a person's performance style in mind. Does that happen? Is that a thing, or it's really just you're designing a puppet and then the sort of casting of the puppeteer that's kind of a blank slate? It could be.
Well, sometimes that occurs. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes that occurs. Oftentimes we'll be creating the character and then the puppeteers will be cast later on. But that, like I say, as we're designing and as we're building, even if a puppeteer hasn't been cast, we're always well aware of creating something that when the character is handed over to the puppeteer, they will have all the tools that they will need to bring it to life. You know, so now if in the case of a handful of projects I've done where we know that who the puppeteer is going to be, sure, we can get them in early on, and then it becomes a collaboration. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it might just be from a technical standpoint, you know, okay, I need the thumb grip here, or I would prefer the lips to do this, etc., etc. But it also might be just a more, you know, sort of philosophical collaboration as to what is this character, you know.
It's interesting, Jason, because you have for the Sesame Street work that you do, there's a sort of a fixed company of puppeteers mainly, right? That do the Sesame Street work. So you may know ahead of time who you're making a new character for, or even if it's an extra or whatever. Does the idea of who the puppeteer is, does that come into play when you're making characters for Sesame?
Often, yes, it does. And we always try to have the cast list, you know, as when we're in production, especially when we're doing the season, and even if we're just assembling AMs, which are the anything Muppets that are the background characters. It's not a full puppet build, but we're making a new character, kind of Mr. Potato Head style. So, you know, if we know who's going to be performing that character, that may affect, you know, what does that character look like or how we build it. Obviously, you know, it can be anything from size of hand or size of forearm to just the nuance that someone brings to it.
Do you have any, I hate to put you on the spot, but do you have any examples of anything like that for Sesame recently?
Well, specific examples, well, okay, I might get in trouble. One of my favorite puppeteers for Sesame Street is Tyler Bunch, who is one of the most animated and one of the most varied puppeteers. He's almost the Mel Blanc of puppeteers, and I adore working with him. But he has a big hand, and somehow he always manages to get cast, and he's not doing it. He always manages to get cast the tiniest little puppets. And it's like, how does this keep happening? And I remember one time I had to rip one puppet open and make it bigger so that he could actually get his hand in there. But, you know, it was kind of unfair, but he's a jewel to work with, and the performance you get out of him is just fantastic. And one of the things I really wanted to say about creating these characters is that my team goes as far as they can, making the best puppet, just like Pete says, to give the puppeteers, you know, the best performance they can give. You know, it's as mobile as it can be. It has as much character as we can give it. It'll have, you know, movement that a puppeteer could do business with. We've done what we can, and then it's like we've done half of it, and then that puppeteer just takes it the rest of the way and brings it to life, you know, with their performance. And it's not just putting a hand in a puppet, it's that nuance, it's that soul that Pete was talking about. And all of a sudden, it's living.
It's an interplay. I mean, I remember hearing stories about Frank Oz having very particular ideas about, you know, the insides of the puppet for Miss Piggy and such. Pete, I wonder if you have any experience working with a build that then you've had to adapt for the needs of a puppeteer.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. And I mean, almost all the time, really. So, you know, because, and particularly if a show is, let's take Dinosaurs, for example. I know I'm going back a bit, but nevertheless, you know, given that it went for 4 seasons, we had the time to improve the characters and ultimately give the puppeteers eventually what they wanted. You know, sometimes if you're dealing with a commercial or a short, you know, a film where the shoot is a very short period of time, you know, we just have to wing it and go with what we've built. But if you know, if we've got the time, yeah, we will end up, you know, I guess customizing various characters for the puppeteers, and because as you can appreciate, the puppeteers tend to take a little bit of time to get comfortable with the character, you know, and to figure out what it can and can't do. And if it can't do something, then it becomes a really important character trait, then we will go in and fix the puppet so that the puppeteer can achieve a particular move or a particular expression, you know.
I mean, what's so interesting about what both of you are saying is that there's, you're not just building puppets, you're creating actors in a sense.
Yeah,
So
I like to think it that way, yeah.
So your work really sort of necessitates that collaboration and sort of bringing it all the way into the realm of performance.
And you know, let me just say, sorry to interrupt there, Barbara, but let me just thought something. It doesn't really matter about the style of the puppet, whether it's realistic or whether it's, say, quote, Muppet style. These characters have to appear real.
Sure.
You know, and that's the important thing. But stylistically, it doesn't matter. You know.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's right. I'd like to move into who is this guy? I'd like to talk a little bit about your individual journeys that resulted in your careers. There's a lot of interest, and, you know, I'm sure among our audience tonight and just in general, I'm sure, you know, if you do public appearances, people want to know, like, how do I get involved in this? How do I get started? So I think this conversation will speak to that a little bit. But before we even get into advice, just be great to hear about your individual stories. How did you sort of wind up doing this? What was your journey? And since we have your picture in the marquee, Jason, we can start with you.
I moved to New York in the end of 1984 to go to NYU to get my master's in design for what was going to be theater. And while I was working in the costume shop there, the traveling arena shows, you know, Sesame Street Live, and not the ice shows, but the ones that go to the tour of the world, the human size, were built at that time in the New York shop during the summers. And they were looking for a fabric painter and dyer. So they contacted the costume shop manager at NYU saying, do you have any students that look promising? And he asked me, and I said, and I had just taken the fabric painting and dyeing course that year. And
you were an expert.
No, oh dear Lord, no. But they said, do you want to try it? And I said, sure, what could happen? You know, so it was all on the job, and it was amazing. But somehow I had an affinity for it, and I had a passion for it. It was really, I loved color. I loved the movement, how you got those colors. I just loved it. So I started there, and I did every summer between my 3 years. And then once I graduated, they kind of said, they kept me as much as they could, you know, as long as they had projects. As I said, I was freelance, and then stayed until they made me staff. And then as I was kind of junior costume designer, Polly Smith, this brilliant master costume designer for, you know, everything, including Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island, many, 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 many more things, but she's just inspired. So of course she got everything. It's like, what do we need you for? But there were a few times when there were some overlaps, and she was on the big movie, and then they said, we have the smaller project, do you want to do it? Absolutely. This was one of the examples. This was Webulous World of Dr. Seuss. So I was the painter and dyer and the costume designer for that project. And I loved it. It was incredible. And from there, I got to do the Muppet Classic Theater, which was the fairy tales. It was, you know, direct to video at that time. And became a project leader on something that was going to be shot in Florida. It was Animal Jam. So I went to Florida with that, and they were, immediately after that, we shot the Muppets, sorry, not 3D, Sesame 3D for Universal Osaka. So those were my first two project leaders. And then when I came back, there was this big changeover in the company at that time, and I became sort of the art director for Sesame Street. Connie Peterson was still general manager, and then after we sort of went through a couple of years, and then all of a sudden I was asked to be the creative supervisor, and here I am.
So surprised.
I know.
That's great. And here you are. let's hear about Pete's journey.
Grief.
Such a great picture.
Dear me.
Kermit's
So,
speaking to you there.
yeah. Do you want me to go?
Yes, go.
Oh, well. So, so I'm one of those people who, I was making puppets very early on as a kid, you know, like 7, 8 years old. I don't know why, I just had it was just something I was into. And, you know, I'm not going to get too granular about it, but I grew up in a smallish town in the north of England. So outside of the big cities, access to materials was almost zero. So I had to figure a lot of stuff out myself. But as I grew up and as I got into my teenage years and so on and so forth, the Muppet Show was on television and it was a big influence, but also many effects movies and so on and so forth were also influences on me. So pretty much when I was going to school, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get into making creatures. And as you can imagine, almost everybody around me was like, what are you talking about? You can't do that, you know? And I guess I just didn't take no for an answer. And I had a lot of support from my parents, which I will forever be grateful. They did not detract, you know, get from. They didn't tell me not to pursue my passion, so to speak. And I went to art college and film school and had a portfolio of work that I'd done, sculpts and makeups and puppets that I'd made and so forth. And I went down to London. Just moved to London with no job and called the creature shop and bugged them for a few months. And I was lucky. I got an interview with an amazing person down there, and he said, well, we're not hiring at the moment, but we'll give you a call. And I got a call a few months later, and it was to start work on The Storyteller.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it, really, because you know, it had been my passion and my desire, my wish to not only make creatures, but to work with Jim Henson, who at the time, well, it's probably to this day, but certainly at the time he was the best. You know, it was like shooting for the moon. And I, you know, 6 months out of college, and there I was in the shop. You know,
that's incredible. It's just great to hear those stories and know that those kinds of things are possible.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, there's many times where I didn't think it would be possible, but you just have something in the back of your mind. You just think, no, it's worth it. I'm gonna go for it. It's worth it. You know, people do ask me, you know, how do I get to the shop? You know, how do I get a job in this world, creature world? And I think it's the same with lots of jobs. To be honest with you, if you really want it enough, you really want it, you go for it. And yes, there's a certain amount of luck involved, and I can't remember who said this, but you've got to make sure that when the opportunity comes, as lucky as that opportunity may be, you've got the backup, you've done the work, you've got the portfolio, you've got the skills to be able to rise to the occasion when it's presented to you. You know.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We'll talk, I think, a little bit more in a moment about advice.
Okay.
General things like that. But I'd like to talk a little about Age of Resistance, and my understanding, this is the shop for or one of the shops for Age of Resistance, and I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that you both had a role in putting that production together, and that's the Netflix series, The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance, the exciting prequel to the Dark Crystal story, which was on Netflix and completely fantastic. Big production, and so you guys worked a bit together on that. Can you say a little bit about your collaboration on that? And was that unusual? Had you ever worked together before?
Sure, I'll jump in there. Yeah, I've worked with Jason before. Yeah, sure. But this was kind of a unique situation. Jason was able to free himself up from his obligations in New York and come to Los Angeles, and not only did he provide a huge amount of sort of creative supervision as regards primarily the costumes. You've got to remember that on Age of Resistance, the costumes were as involved as the the sculpting and the puppets. They're a work of art in themselves. But Jason also was very hands-on and created a lot of things. But the main thing I remember is this magnificent Augur's cloak, which, if you ever get the chance to see up close, it's an amazing, it's layers of just beautiful work. And so Jason was able to spend a few months with us here in Los Angeles. And I mean, Jason will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the only time that we've had an extended period of working together. Obviously, like, we talk to each other all the time, on the phone and Zoom calls now. But in terms of an extended period of time working together side by side, I think Age of Resistance was the first time we'd had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and actually, unfortunately, this slide right here is actually the costume shop, which was an additional building that was about 10 minutes away from the Burbank Creature Shop. So I was banished. No, I'm sorry, just kidding. It was an amazing place to work. But so I was housed there, and that's where I did my work. And Pete, obviously, at the Creature Shop, heading up all of the sculptures. And
is that what this is, or this is also this is also costume?
That's the costume. Yeah, that's the costume place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
sorry, go ahead.
It was a studio that had been rented out, and they turned it into this place where we could work both on the Skeksis as well as the Gelflings and the Pod People, and it's really an amazing opportunity. And of course, we would meet for production meetings at the Creature Shop conference room. It was really amazing.
That's right. Yeah.
All hands on deck.
Yes.
We ran out of space in Burbank, in the Burbank shop, with all the sculptures and molds and animatronics and so on and so forth that were being built, the puppet fabrication, that we had to get a satellite shop to deal with all the costumes. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen the Creature Shop that full.
Great. We have a lot of questions from audience members.
Great.
So we can get to some of those. Let's see. What was the most challenging or complicated puppet you've ever worked on? For either.
Boy, that's a good question, because there's, I've found that it's almost difficult to answer that question because there wasn't just one puppet that was difficult. Each one has their own sort of inherent challenges, if you will. Let's take, for example, going way back when we used to do animatronic animals for things like Cats and Dogs and Dr. Dolittle, Eddie Murphy, Dr. Dolittle. Big challenge. One of the biggest challenges is duplicating actual real life, so it looks real, but there again, where the wild things are, huge challenge, because they had to be faithful to Maurice Sendak's design, also look about as real as they possibly could, also be 8.5 to 9 feet tall, and also be able to run around the forest, so that was a challenge, but different than creating, say, the tiger for Dr. Dolittle, if you know what I mean. And then if we get to more sort of fantastical creatures, it can be sometimes difficult to create, how can we say, the right sense of expression for them. There might be or characters. Like the Gelflings were a real major challenge because they're so small. Mm-hmm. So how do we get someone's hand in the Gelfling, but also retain the correct features without, once you put your hand in, the head gets distorted. So it's very difficult for me to pinpoint one creature that was, or one job that was more challenging than the other. They always seem to be challenging.
Unique challenges. How about you, Jason?
Oh, I agree with Pete, because it really is, something simple can be challenging just because it needs to look effortless, and yet you need to let it do everything that it needs to do as far as performance or expression or whatever it is. And you can't have cables showing underneath, or, you know, somebody's hand showing in their neck like a goiter, or there are so many animatronic pieces running through it that it's literally like wearing an anvil on the puppeteer's back inside. We did Scales, which was this walk around dragon for Ariel's Island, which nobody's ever heard of. But I remember, you know, I just remember the animatronic cables, and there weren't servos in it, but it was just all of the controls on it were so kind of horrifying, actually. I did work on the painting of it, but I wasn't involved in the actual build of it. So I was just kind of watching it from afar, being amazed.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you're talking about animatronics, and someone else had a question about this, which is something that I wanted to ask about the evolution of the sort of changes in the work, in the processes, in the technology, you know, with CGI becoming much more sort of a method of choice. You know, people are turning to that instead of sort of practical puppets or effects that have things like servos and animatronics. And I know for Age of Resistance, that was sort of new, you know, that was the exception that proved the rule almost, because it was a choice, sort of a newsworthy choice, that the production was going with practical puppets and not just computer generated imagery. So I'm curious about how you each have seen your industry, your work change over the past decade or two in the face of the, you know, the advent of CGI.
Mm-hmm.
Pete, you want to take?
Yeah, sure. A variety of things. When I started, you know, there were no computers. Crikey, there were no cell phones. We were still writing on chalk slate, there are some things that have changed and there are some things that haven't. So, for example, we were talking about getting the soul of a character and design and so on and so forth. That, for me, is pretty much the same as it was, and I suspect it's pretty much the same as it will always be. The technical aspects of it, in other words, how we you know, make an eye blink, how we make the brows move and so on and so forth, that has changed. And also the fundamental thing that, and then Jim started this way back when, the fundamental thing that we've been able to develop is the putting the performance, I know this, I'm not making a joke here, but putting the performance in the hands of one puppeteer, you know. Back in the day, even when I was working on Storyteller, we would have, it was cable controlled, so very much like a bike cable, and you know, a push-pull would blink an eye, and then this push-pull would blink this eye. So if you wanted both eyes to blink at the same time, you know, you had to push and pull, and it just built up. The more expressions you had, the more cables you had, the more puppeteers all had to be in sync together. Mm-hmm. So this, I mean, it's amazing that anybody could get a performance that way, quite frankly. And that's how they did Dark Crystal and a lot of Labyrinth, and that's how we did a lot of the original Dark Crystal, and that's how we did a lot of Storytelling. But then as we moved through, particularly on Jim Henson's hour, but then in large part when we got into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we were starting to develop a hand control, which, to be fair, had been came out of the New York shop and Faz and whatnot, the Waldo concept. Mm-hmm. And we took that in London and developed it for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that was also when computers just started to emerge. Mm-hmm. And then subsequent to that, we've been able to build what we call the Henson Performance Control System and the Henson Digital Performance System, which puts many expressions in the hands of just one performer, one puppeteer, which we think gives a stronger integrity to the performance and a stronger sort of performance, I guess you could say. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, as you can imagine, the arc through our business from wholly practical effects. You know, I mean, there was a time when I was starting when you could only achieve a creature effect by doing it practically.
Yep.
Towards the end of the 90s, and particularly into the 2000s, early 2000s, CG really took over. And we did see a decline in the type of, particularly movie jobs that we were given. And it started to pick up a bit, actually, in the past decade, because practical effects, there's something about seeing the textures and something that's actually standing in front of the cameras in the set, lit by the set lights and so on. There's a sort of verisimilitude that works. And now, of course, we have the advantage of being able to do hybrid characters where CG, computer graphics can enhance the expressions of a practical puppet. So it's almost come back around again,
Yeah. Jason, I wonder if that evolution in technology or the changes in technology have changed your work as much because you're not as involved in animatronics, et cetera. I mean, maybe that has. So it would be great if you could speak to that, and also maybe just the changes in some of the materials that you're using, even the soft materials for the more kind of Muppety things.
Well, actually, yes. Of course, we don't do as much animatronic work, remote control and things like that. However, technology has improved. We're basically, still doing things similarly to the way they were developed. But using that Waldo system that Pete mentioned, we have radio-controlled Elmo on his radio-controlled tricycle that runs around Sesame Street, for example. And, the servos have improved. But, it's that constant trying to get what you need out of what's at hand. But because we don't do as much animatronics as Pete and his team do, that, we're more at the whims of availability of materials and, things that we've used for decades, basically all our lives, have stopped being produced, and things have come along to replace it that are different. And we either need to adapt or find a different solution, or just complain all the way through it. But no. So it's this constant looking for what shall we use now that what we used to use is no longer available. Mm-hmm. So it's this constant sourcing problem.
I wonder, because they're so like in this world of making things for the screen, it seems it's sort of limitless what is possible, right? You could make anything happen on screen nowadays. So I wonder if there have been, and this is I think a question that we had from an audience member, are there ever things that jobs that come to you, to the company, to each of your shops? I'm imagining maybe this is more appropriate for Pete, that you just say, we can't, like we don't do that. Like we can't achieve that for you.
Every once in a while, but it's normally down to there's not enough budget or there's not enough time. Mm-hmm. It's interesting question, because creatively, I like to think that there's pretty much anything that there's nothing that we can't do. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? There's always a solution. I mean, no is not a good answer to a creative problem. Saying no is not an answer. So oftentimes, we'll try and figure out a solution, but every once in a while there'll be something where there's just simply not enough time to pull it off, or the particular client just doesn't have the money to be able to pull it off. Mm-hmm.
I have two more questions to ask you, because we're basically out of time.
Really?
Which went so quickly. I mean,
wow, that went quick.
I know, it's crazy. I'd stay here a lot longer. So I had promised that we were going to offer whatever advice you have for aspiring either puppet makers or folks that really feel like they have talent or drive to get involved in the kind of work that happens at the shop, and what kinds of advice that you would have for folks that that are eager to get involved?
Well, it's always different. Like I said, we have such a diverse group of artists from such a diverse background, and they come at it from all different fields or disciplines. And we have fine artists, we have industrial designers, we have people from the theater, we have people from you know, who are used to building props for various things. We have costume makers, builders for movies or commercials, or also for theater. The head of our costume department, Connie Peterson, is this brilliant woman from the Metropolitan Opera costume shop, and Barbara Matera's costume shop for Broadway, who is working with us. And there are times when, well, basically, anybody can send their resume to us and links to a portfolio or something like that. We will try to interview as many people as we can, only because the best, but we expect the best. So getting to meet new people is the way that our creature shop will continue.
Oh,
So,
like when you're looking at a portfolio, what are the things that jump out to you that say this is really special?
Well, it's seeing something excellently done. I mean, I hate to sound like that, but something that's very committed, something with a spark, something unexpected often, and you'll see something different in different portfolios, in that, you know, someone is just beyond skilled, and it's just like, I would like to work with that person this minute. So, you know, and others where I've never seen anything like this before in my life, or they've got a quirky attitude that somehow can match some project you know is coming up, or you keep them on file so that something comes up later on, and then you can use that. So it's there. There's no one thing. People come to us as interns. People come to us as junior level. People come with, you know, decades worth of experience, and it's there. But there also has to be this sense of family, and, you know, someone we've never met. Because they're such eclectic artists with such eccentric backgrounds. Sometimes, you know, they all have to be able to work together. If you get somebody who's going to stir the pot, you know, I can't, no matter how talented they are, I can't bring them in and torpedo this project because of attitude alone, you know. So there's a whole mix of things that we're looking for.
How about in LA, Pete?
In LA, well, a couple of things that spring to my mind. Years ago, and I can't remember who was telling me this, but there was two types of people. There was the people who were in love with the idea of doing something, and there were those people who loved just doing it. And I was a person who loved doing it, and that's what I'm looking for: someone who just loves doing it. And I've talked about, you know, really wanting it and backing that up with with your technical expertise and your creative expertise and so on and so forth. But this, Jason's right. The people I work with, they come from all different types of disciplines, you know, different walks of life. But they all love doing what they're doing, and so I think that's key. In terms of portfolios, yeah, you know, if you're going to be a sculptor, then show me some sculptures. You know, if you want to be a designer, show me some drawings. You know, they don't have to be creature drawings. They could be figure drawings that you've done at an art class or something like that. You know, but I can see if you understand form, and if you're able to describe the form two-dimensionally, or if you're able to describe the form three-dimensionally in a sculpture. You know, or indeed nowadays we get a lot of digital work as well, which is totally valid. But you know, with the digital side of things, I like to see a sense that the person has not just simply used all the tools in the computer. You know, I mean, you can Photoshop's very clever. You know, you can do a lot with it without actually having the ability to draw, for example. So in other words, a spark is what we're looking for, and you can definitely tell. You can tell when particularly when young people come in and they have portfolio and they show me their work in a portfolio. You can tell whether they've got the spark, and then by talking to them, you can also tell whether they're really into what they're doing, or whether they're just like, oh, I just want to work at the creature shop, you know. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
And Pete, you've had you know, this firsthand experience in working on the Creature Shop Challenge and
oh God, yeah,
getting aspiring, you know, puppet builders and having to do so on camera. So that's
yeah. No, that was a great show actually. In the end, and it's the only time I've ever been involved in anything like that. You know, a quote unquote reality TV show, but. And fascinating to see the level of creative skill and expertise that all the contestants had on that particular show.
Yeah.
And it was a win-win situation. I mean, the guy who won, Robert, is still with us.
He's your colleague. Yeah.
Yeah, he is absolutely. Yeah.
So I'll just ask one last question, just to bring us out. Because these are a series of conversations that focus on Jim Henson's legacy. And you both work at the Jim Henson Creature Shop, which was founded by Jim and a very, very small group of folks back in the 1960s. So do you, how do you feel that presence in your work? Is there one thing you can isolate that is something that you still feel that he is sort of handed down, and that it still sort of imbues the work that you guys do there?
Yeah, I mean, I had the advantage of working with him, albeit only for 2.5, 3 years. But yeah, I mean, I often ask myself, hey, I wonder what Jim would do, you know, and it's just a sense of integrity, you know, maintaining integrity, I think.
Jason?
For me.
There was a sense of being able to spot the talent, spot that spark in the people that he brought. He was based in New York when I started, and we had a bit of an overlap. Although, as I said, we were working on the arena shows. He didn't have a lot to do with that, only when we were creating a new character for one of the shows, he would come over for final approval. So being able to spend a little bit of time, not work, you know, next to him like Pete did, I mean, he was awesome. He was so kind, so generous, so encouraging, and to be able to instill this, as Pete said, this environment for artists to be able to do their best, to want to do their best, and nothing but their best, is so inspiring. And that is what I want my team to feel. I want them to know that I only want their best, and I want them to want to give their best.
Yeah.
Carry on, gentlemen, with great work. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday evening. Now we even have options of places to go, you know, very carefully with masks on. But really, I appreciate the time. It's been great to get to know both of you a little better. And
thanks, Barbara, and also a big thanks to everybody. I mean, you know, I'm on this Zoom thing, and I'm seeing all these messages coming on, and I really appreciate people's interest in what we do, and I really appreciate people watching what we do.
Very much so.
It's a fantastic community. I feel privileged to be here with all the fans, with all the fans of Jim's work then and now, and it was great to spend the evening with you all.
Likewise.
Likewise. Thank you.
Again.
Thank you very much.
Have a great night.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.